Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishnan Nair. Here, basically, we are discussing about the formulas, and in these formulas, basically, we have discussed that is basically 160 parts. Basically, this is 161 part, and in 161 part, basically, uh, we are going to see lots of things. Basically, that is basically the balance sheet we have already saw, but a few things from balance sheet we are going to see. um, Balance sheet are equal to basically attributes, formulas, attributes, you can say. There are hundreds of formulas and hundreds of balance sheets are there, and each country basically creates one balance sheet, and each attributes connect with hundreds of balance sheet. So here basically the point is that how the sales industry is working in India. Basically, you can say we will take one example of the sales industry, how the sales industry is working, and few examples of the sales industry. Because one of the person basically asked me the question that what actually the sales is. So this video is the best example. That is 160 number video and 161 number video. So that is the best example basically, you can say, of the sales, what actually the sales is. So here basically we will be discussing that first in 160 basically we have already discussed how Amazon basically is doing his sales basically, and before sales basically he have to do the production also. I have taken one example of the capsicum, brown capsicum. So 4 to 5 crore people is having the brown blood cells activation, energy gets generated, and that energy is of the brown cells, brown capsicum. So that basically is generated on the base of certain softwares and software services basically, because Amazon believe only in services, and services are basically everybody knows what is services in AWS. So here basically that is basically a technical part. What actually Amazon is doing the services, how basically Amazon is having the 3,000 servers, and on the base of auto scaling basically how Amazon is basically load balancer, each and every concept introduced by the Amazon, and basically how the 3,000 on the base of just 3,000 server, he's handling the entire world basically. So previously, basically, one or two server basically is required for the one company basically. But nowadays, the Amazon is telling that we have solved this all problem. Reason basically is the study of the data basically, when which type of websites are getting used and what is the peak hours of the websites. On the base of the server formula has written. Server formula means auto scaling and the load balancer concept basically has written. And on the base of that, basically the data is the customers are getting transferred to here and there basically. So according to that, basically the adjustment is happening. So that's basically the Amazon basically, that is the AWS. And here basically how sales comes, how demand is getting supply, and how the demand is getting increase, how the supply is getting increased. That basically we have already saw. For example, brown capsicum is more popular in Russia and Europe. So Amazon is telling that we have basically 20 crore people who is having the Amazon blood cells. That means basically in Amazon Amazon is the main blood cell. In Amazon blood cells, where basically there are more than hundreds of subcells, and in hundreds of cells, basically there are 4 to 5 crore subcells of the capsicum. Basically, that is basically the brown capsicum. So brown capsicum, that is basically for the 4 to 6 crore basically people who is having the brown capsicum basically, you can say brown capsicum blood cells, sub blood cells, because Amazon is the main blood cells. And in this basically there is one web services which is basically used, and that basically have many groups basically connected with this, because it's a brown capsicum, right? So brown capsicum basically has basically many vitamins. So according to the vitamins, basically the lots of things are divided basically, you can say, and many basically manipulation happen. Then after that, then many nuclear company came into the picture, or energy power companies. So basically, just imagine the sales industry, how it's connected. This is basically the one of the sales industry best example. of the sales industry. That is basically the modern world sale, basically you can say. The sale is which is basically happening from the human bodies, basically. The production is happening from the human bodies. So human bodies are getting used like this basically. So this is basically the sales we can say. So this is the best example of sales. And the, another one more example basically we will take, but that is basically the live example you can say. This was the Amazon, Microsoft, basically do Salesforce. They basically do this type of production only. And in this basically the Bollywood blood cells is also there. So basically who are watching the movies, who are watching the movies in theaters. So they basically gets the energy of the Bollywood, and then basically the productions happens. So that's basically the Bollywood management industry who says that we have done the we have created the Bollywood industry, and we have basically managing the each and every Bollywood blood cells and the energies and the production of the Bollywood energies basically. You can say. So one of the there are basically more than 16 to 17 categories of the basically Bollywood blood cells, and one of the blood cells and the energy is software energy. So software is basically one of the energies, one of the blood cells of the uh, Bollywood industry. So this is basically one example of the sales. And another example basically we will see one. I will take one example. For example, in Vadodara city, there is one city in Gujarat state, and country is India. In India country, basically there is one state called Gujarat, and in Gujarat, basically there is one city that is basically Vadodara city. It can be any city, but here basically I'm taking as an example of Vadodara city. For example, basically for human, basically there is for in one day basically there are 24 hours, right? So 24 hours basically the each and every person have to take their oxygen, right? So they are taking the oxygen for 24 hours. The oxygen is basically get the each and every person basically is getting oxygen according to the foods and the activities they have done. So whatever activity, for example, they have opened yahoo.com. So yahoo.com energy basically gets into them body. So basically blood cells of Yahoo basically get generates whatever generation basically Yahoo has done, that is by default going to generate whatever the blood mapping basically. For example, Yahoo blood cells have more than thousands of blood cells, so that is basically going to by default going to generate. So as per the view of the Yahoo pages, the energy gets generated and the blood cells gets activated. So like this basically there are many websites, many things basically get generated. So here basically we are talking about the 24 hours of the human of the body. According to that, basically it takes the oxygen. So now basically we will jump into the human needs basically, that are basically the what are the human needs basically of any city. That is basically foods, the petrols, the oils which they consumes, the waters basically which they consumes, and basically the activities they do basically, right? According to the activity which they do, and according to the consumption of the human body which they have consumed, according to the behavior of the human they have. For example, few people says that we like aloo ka paratha, so they have taken aloo ka paratha. In that basically ingredients are potatoes, maidas, then masalas, then oils are there. Few people have butters. So this basically generates one oxygen, right? Then basically few people had some food. So like this basically each and every people have the foods. So from few people have the foods from the restaurants, hotels, and then basically who are basically local residents, they gets the foods from the home basically. So here what is the main basically? That is basically ingredients from where the materials are basically getting and got. So the materials are where basically the materials are getting from the malls, from the shops, from the big shops, from the shops, small shops, and there is basically many other ways are there. Onlines are there. Like this, basically many ways are there. So few people get takes directly, but the city is one. According to that, the settings are done basically, you can say. So here I am taking one example, best example, one example I have already taken of the sales, and this is the one of more example of the sales basically. So these are the two are the best examples, you can say, of the sales industry. So the people who basically says that the what is actually the sales. So these two example is the best example you can give to that particular interview, whoever is basically taking the interview. So this basically because the modern it's a modern world, each and everything's are basically happening according to the modern world. So according to that, the sales industry is also working. So the last example was one example, first example, and this example which I am taking, that is the second example. So whatever the ingredients basically the human is taking is basically added in the foods that are basically coming from shops, right? Malls, small, and then internet is there. So like this, basically they are taking the ingredients, like so, right? So whenever human basically eats the food, so according to some certain time, basically he gets the oxygen automatically. That's basically you can say the attraction subject basically sammohan basically with sammohan in Hindi basically it's called as a sammohan. So according to the foods basically they have taken, according to that basically they gets the oxygen power supply, that basically is get taken from the body, taken into the body. So that basically comes from the power supply company and the oxygen company and the set of nuclear power company who are connected with the set of countries. So for certain countries basically there are set of nuclear power plant who are basically connected always 24 hours basically, right? So you can say that human are basically into oxygen only. Each and every people are basically into the oxygen power supply basically, which is basically getting, which the human is getting from the power supply company, energy company, and the nuclear plant basically. So for example, the India basically, India is the one country. There basically, I have taken one example of Gujarat and Vadodara city. And in Vadodara city, assume that there are two to three power companies who are basically giving the power supply and oxygen power supply, and there are few energy companies who are connected with the power supply basically. So if I say that energy companies are also connected with the power supply, then it would be 100% correct, because the oxygen data are basically sent to the power companies and then basically the process happens. So there are basically many ways basically you can say, because nobody disclose their secrets basically. So like this basically the nuclear power plants are there. So I assume that there are basically in Vadodara city there are three power companies attached with the Vadodara city, who is controlling the each and every objects of the Vadodara city. So here basically human is basically one taken as an object, who are basically taking 24 hours the oxygen, whatever according to the activities and according to the human needs which they have consumed inside the body. So one paratha, aloo ka paratha example I have taken. And another is basically the nuclear power plant. Basically, for example, here basically we will take that around 12 power plant, 12 nuclear plant basically, 10 nuclear companies are basically connected with these energies and the power companies. And basically assume that there are more than 27 to 28 crore, 28 lakh people who are basically staying in Vadodara. So 28 lakh people basically are getting the oxygen power supply from the two to three power supplies and the four to five energy companies, and basically around 12 and nuclear plant basically 10 nuclear companies basically. So like this the calculation has done. So here the main thing is what? Main thing is that the nuclear power plant basically whatever data they are going to supply to the Vadodara city, according to that only the all the human needs are sent to the Vadodara city, right? Whatever human needs, basically the people are of the Vadodara, that is basically 20 lakh people are going to consume inside the body. According to that only the nuclear power plants are basically sending the data. So here the main thing is each and every things are basically chained, you can say, the connected with each other. So for example, there are 25 malls basically. They are having human needs. They basically got the human needs from the set of companies basically. And the set of companies basically who are producing the human needs, they are directly connected with that nuclear plants, which are basically sending the data to the energy data to the energy companies, and the energy companies are basically sending the data to the power company, and then basically the human gets the oxygen power supply. That is basically 24 hours basically we are getting. So here basically the main thing is what the chaining system of the human needs basically, which are getting to the malls. Assume that there are 25 malls in the Vadodara city. The 25 malls basically which are getting the human needs, that is one chain, and the another chain is the 12 power plant who are basically sending the oxygen power supply or the energies, the data basically of the energies, according to the 25 moles groups basically, which they have got the human needs data from the companies basically who has produced the human needs according to the nuclear plant, that is basically 12 nuclear plant. So you can just assume the uh, chaining system also basically, you can say how the sales chaining system is connected. So this is basically the new technique basically. This is basically very old technique, but it's never basically systematic way. Systematically way basically never people has understood it. So this basically each and everything basically you might be basically you will be might be learning in the sales industry. That is basically the nowadays basically if nobody gets the job without without the degree, that is basically IITs, IIMs, and the MBAs basically, you can say. So in this MBAs, IITs, IIMs, basically there is basically teach you the system basically, and this is the one of the system basically which is running in this city basically. So that is basically I have taken as an example of India's country, Gujarat state, and Vadodara city. So here basically just taken as an example, but in real basically there are many cities, many states, and many countries basically. So the concept basically of the data sending is like this only across the world. So this is the only way basically, because there is no other way created um, by the system basically creator group basically who are basically creating the countries, who are creating the states, who are creating the cities basically. So this is the best example of the sales industry, who says that sales basically what actually the sales is. So basically if anybody asks nowadays that what actually the sales is, so these two are the best example of the sales industry, what actually the sales is and what actually the business management is. Business management means here basically I have taken the example of the sales industry as a business management. That is basically you can say the MBA and IITs, IIMs basically, who are basically into the business development of the cities basically, you can say. So this is the best example basically how the basically the malls are working, how the power companies are connected with the malls, how the energy companies are connected with the malls, how the nuclear plant basically are directly connected with the malls basically, you can say, because mall is the only way basically and the shops are the only way where basically human gets their human needs and which they consumes inside the body, and which they eats, and according to that basically the blood cells gets generated. So like this basically you can just imagine the sales industry, the management industry, the IITs, the IIMs basically how they are basically the into the system creation, and this is the best example of the system. In this basically the lots of uh, rules and regulation comes into the picture, because according to the nuclear power plant basically the data which was given to the power plant and the which they send to the each and every house, according to that basically the blood cells also get generated, and according to that basically the medical industry also gets generated. So so you can say that 12 nuclear plant is the base basically of the Vadodara city, you can say. So whatever basically sales, entire sales basically which is getting handled, that is according to that 12 nuclear plant basically, you can say. And that 12 nuclear plant are basically how they are creating the each and every energies that basically they knows. So if we go little bit upper level, then basically it's connected with the set of satellites basically. So like this, you can just imagine the sales industry, the Amazon industry, who is basically doing the production from the human bodies. And I have taken one example of the brown capsicum basically, and brown capsicum. And Microsoft basically also generates lots of fruits are there, lots of vegetables are there, because they are telling that basically this is the only way basically they can get the money back from the investment basically, because they have done lots of money. So Amazon is telling that they have spent 1 lakh crore dollar. So how to get the 1 lakh crore dollar basically? Because if government will always tell we will give you the money, we will give you the money, but that basically the government is there when they will give you the money, that everybody knows. So here basically the Amazon and Microsoft basically are directly doing the production, but government are basically connected with them only directly. So it's basically the, you can say the system is ongoing. So system is ongoing, the system should work basically, that's all. So whatever way basically the system work, that the system is supposed to be work, and the work should be in systematic manner basically, you can say. So the system is getting created, the system are basically learned by the IITs, IIMs and MBAs groups, who basically says that yeah, basically we are the base of the system. And in international level basically you can say it's a Harvard University, Oxford University. They also basically say that we are also creating the international level system basically. And Harvard University basically have lots of courses basically, you can say, who basically teach the system basically, you can say, how basically you can do the sales. This is the basically the best example of the sales, you can say. These two is the best example of the sales industry. So here basically why we have taken this into the formula, because whatever the formula basically is going to generate, that is basically directly connected with these two example. That is basically the best example of the sales industry. So here basically we are stopping. This is basically 161st number, and in 162 basically we are going to see a little bit more about the formulas, the Bollywood industry, and the other sectors basically which are connected with the uh, Bollywood and software industry. So the two sales example I have already given. Anybody ask that what actually the sales is, then basically you can tell this is the sales. Basically, these two example basically is the sales example. So here basically we are stopping it, and this is basically 161 number, and 162 basically we are going to discuss a little bit more about the formulas, Bollywoods, and other sectors.